Hello and welcome to Washington Talk. I'm Eun Cho. Chairman Kim Jong-un held a marathon Workers' Party plenary meeting and said North Korea would carry out a shocking action and unveil a new strategic weapon. Today we discuss what actions North Korea may take.
이제껏 우리 인민이 당한 고통과 억지된 발전의 대가를 깨끗이 다 받아내기 위한 충격적인 실제 행동으로 넘어갈 것이라고 하시면서
He likes me, I like him, we get along. I think he's a man of his word, so we're going to find out.
In the studio with me today, Mr. Mark Fitzpatrick, Associate Fellow and former Executive Director of IISS Americas. Mr. Fitzpatrick was Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary for Non-Proliferation at the State Department. Also joining me, Colonel David Maxwell, Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defensive Democracies. Colonel Maxwell was a planner for the United Nations Command and the Combined Forces Command. Welcome to the program.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. Great to be here. Happy New Year.
Now, Colonel Maxwell, Chairman Kim Jong-un's Workers' Party plenum speech, he said that he no longer felt bound by self-imposed moratorium on nuclear and long-range missile tests. What do you think was the message to America, and what was most notable to you?
Well, I think there were three main parts to his message to us. First, he's blaming the United States for his problems. The second, he's making a threat when he talks about a new strategic weapon. And the third, though, he does leave the door open to diplomacy. And I think that shows that he does need to talk. He does need a deal, but he is, following the tried and true path of North Korea. Blame the United States, make a threat, but leave the door open. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree at all with what David said. I think most of this speech was aimed at the domestic audience, of course. It wasn't at us. He had to come up with something to say to the North Korean public when he'd failed so miserably. He'd failed to get a deal with the United States. His economy has failed to remove sanctions. So we're back to square one with North Korea. That's the main takeaway I got. We're back to square one. We had 2 years of relative calm, but this year is going to be a year of tension.
Mm-hmm. So for the first time since he took office 7 years ago, Chairman Kim didn't make New Year's speech, and his speech to the party plenum sort of replaced that New Year's speech. Was that for him to avoid direct confrontation with the United States, to make it sound like this is party's decision and not his own?
I didn't see this speech as mainly directed at the United States, so I don't think we should interpret everything that comes out of Pyongyang as what it means for the United States. He had domestic reasons for why he did what he did, and also because he sometimes likes to do things differently. Last year, he was sitting in a library studio, and maybe he just wanted to do something different this year. It also may be that the party is really important, and that was his main audience.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Colonel Maxwell, leading up to the year-end deadline, North Korean officials escalated rhetoric. And compared to that escalated rhetoric, the party speech was a very vague threat to America. So what's your take from this?
Well, I think that Kim Jong-un is operating in what we might consider a gray area between making threats, increasing tensions, threatening provocations, but not crossing some unknown red line, red line that is in really President Trump's mind. We don't know what that red line is. So he's trying to search out that gray area to ratchet up tensions, to really force us to give concessions, but without crossing that red line that will cause a response from the United States. And so he's searching that out. And I think that they keep it intentionally vague, and I think that that's often what they do. Everybody expected something to happen on Christmas Day, then New Year's Day, maybe the Orthodox Christmas on 7 January, something will happen. But I think that they are trying to search out that gray area and do what they think will get the results that they want.
Do you think the door to diplomacy is still open, or did Chairman Kim or North Korea decide to leave denuclearization talks for now?
I wouldn't say the door is closed. He was very skeptical of U.S. efforts to keep the door open. He denounced almost U.S. efforts as being insincere. But he did make his statements about no denuclearization conditional on U.S. actions. Now, the U.S. actions that he's asking for are they're not going to happen. But it's not an absolute no talks, no denuclearization. There's an area here that can be explored.
And Colonel Maxwell, this is your expertise. So North Korea, Chairman Kim Jong-un said that North Korea may launch a shocking action and that he may unveil a new strategic weapon. So what do you think this may be?
Well, I think that's a great question, and I think that's what everybody's trying to figure out. The obvious one, some kind of satellite launch, some kind of ICBM launch. He's certainly giving us indications that something might happen at the Sohae launch facility. Those 2 engine tests, could be very significant. But people have speculated a satellite launch into space, an ICBM launch over the Pacific at altitude, maybe not to distance. And then, of course, there's worst case, doing a nuclear test, something like that. One thing I am curious about are those engine tests solid fuel rockets, and will they be, are they perfecting a system where they can have, like the Hwasong 15, with a solid fuel rocket system rather than liquid fuel, and a solid fuel ICBM on a mobile launcher would be a real game changer. And so those are the types of things. But what I really worry about is what he's not showing us. So we're focused on Sohae, we're focused, on what we can see, and we really have to remember that North Korea is master at denial and deception. And so what are we not seeing? And that's what I think our intelligence community is really focused on.
Dave said it could be a satellite launch. It well could be, but this would put the lie to North Korea's claim that satellite launches are totally peaceful. I mean, if they're talking about a strategic weapon, well, you can't call it a strategic weapon and then launch a satellite and say, well, that's not a weapon. Yeah. It's one or the other.
That's right.
Former National Security Advisor Ambassador Bolton said that in response to Chairman Kim's speech, that he said that this is the time that the United States should fully resume drills with South Korea, and also open a congressional hearing on whether the troops are ready to fight tonight. What is your take on that?
So I think those are 2 useful options for the United States to deploy at appropriate times. I don't think now is the appropriate time to resume full-scale joint exercises. I would do that after North Korea conducts another provocation. I mean, the speech is just rhetoric, right? They haven't conducted the provocation yet. As for the congressional hearings that Mr. Bolton suggested, that's an interesting idea. That kind of has a certain symmetry. North Korea, Kim made speeches at a party plenum, a congressional hearing at which we discussed the readiness of U.S. forces. That would be sort of symmetrical. So, yeah, that could be something that the United States could use.
Colonel Maxwell, do you think the drills should be fully restored at this time? And what kind of joint drills do you think should be restored?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think in the last 18 months, what we've learned is that our scaling back and canceling and suspending exercises generates no goodwill with Kim Jong-un. He really doesn't care about exercises. He knows they're defensive. They're a tool for him to focus propaganda on and to use for his rhetoric. 1 million North Korean soldiers are in the field conducting the winter training cycle, a larger training exercise than all the ROK-US combined exercises in a year. And they're going to bring their military forces to the highest state of readiness in March at the optimal attack time to attack the South, which is why in the past we always conducted team spirit in March, and that was to deter North Korean activity and to be ready in case they did launch an attack. So I think what is really important and what North Korean military developments require, combined with North Korean rhetoric, is to maintain sufficient Korean and U.S. readiness of our military forces. And the commanders have been designing training to be able to do that. But, we do need to ensure that we do not sacrifice readiness. And in fact, while we have scaled back exercises to support diplomacy, we need to realize that it is the strength of the military that provides a foundation for diplomacy to work.
And Mr. Fitzpatrick, high-level U.S. military officials say that U.S. is fully ready for any provocation by North Korea and that the military can quickly dust off plans of 2017. Do you think, what would be the trigger for America to even consider the bloody nose strike sort?
So in 2017, there was unsourced speculation that the United States was considering a so-called bloody nose preemptive strike against a North Korean facility. It wasn't preemptive, it was preventive, because a preemptive strike is when the other side is ready to hit you. And there's a difference here, because if the other side is ready to hit you, then it certainly is logical and defensible to attack. But a preventive strike is taking out somebody else's resources, and you got to consider the escalation that would follow. So the answer to the question is, when would it be logical to do that? At a time when North Korea is really going to strike you, you've got good intelligence on that. Or if you're going to do a preventive strike, you have to have gamed out the consequences and be ready for what I think would be a pretty massive ensuing war.
It was once considered 2 years ago. Is there a chance that it could be again considered now?
Well, I think 2 years ago there was a rhetorical element that was in the air, and it was thought that this would provide a sense of deterrence. Talking about it would warn North Korea. So I think this rhetorical deterrence could be employed again. But actual strikes, I don't know that they were ready to do that in 2017. I don't think they're ready to do that today.
Let me clarify, though. We don't need to go back to 2017. But we have never stopped planning. It's the military's responsibility to provide options to policymakers, to our civilian leaders. And so the military continues to plan for a range of options, whatever North Korea might do. And so the thought that we are dusting off plans, that is really not a correct way to look at it. We're not going back to 2017. We've evolved. We have new capabilities, new plans, and we are prepared to take action against North Korea should they act. Our plans are defensive, and we will act in the defense of our alliance. And as Mark said, if there is information that they are mating a nuclear warhead to an ICBM, clearly we're going to take a preemptive action to defend ourselves.
I want to ask you about the increased reconnaissance activities over the Korean Peninsula. United States have been sending reconnaissance planes in December and into the new year. Those Joint Rivets, Cobra Ball, Dragon Lady, what do they do there?
Well, they are our intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platforms. They collect various types of intelligence to really provide us indications and warnings of North Korean activity and what they might be doing. And so, based on the activities we've seen and the rhetoric, it's prudent for military commanders to request these strategic assets to conduct intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance of North Korea to be able to collect electronic intelligence, signals intelligence, and really across the spectrum of intelligence disciplines to be able to give us indications and warning that something might occur.
They follow missile and nuclear activities?
Yes, they follow a wide variety of activities.
Expert Bob Collin, who's been studying North Korean propaganda, he said the speech was not about weapons, but about preparing his people for a prolonged struggle with America, that it was not about easing sanctions, but about girding people to live under the sanctions. What is your take?
Oh, I agree with Bob on this. When I read the speech, I was struck by how many references there were to self-reliance and juche, and sanctions won't be lifted, so we've got to gird our loins, we've got to tighten our belts, something that Kim Jong-un 7 years ago said they wouldn't have to do anymore. So this was a speech to the domestic people saying, in effect, I've failed to get what we wanted from the United States. So up to you now. You've got to correct your ways. There are a lot of references in the speech to errors by the cabinet, by the people of North Korea. It was a pretty tough speech to his own people.
So before we go, Colonel Maxwell, President Trump, in response to the speech, he emphasized the good relationship he has with Chairman Kim. He said that I like him, he likes me. So do you think this personal relationship between the two leaders can give some kind of breathe new life into the denuclearization talks?
Well, it's possible. I think actually both Kim and President Trump are trying to protect the relationship that they've developed. I think you can see that in both of the ways that they don't personally attack each other. Only their surrogates do that. But frankly, I don't think it's really possible, because I think that Kim Jong-un is not acting in a sincere manner. I think that he wants to keep his nuclear weapons, so he's going to do that. We also can't forget his real long-term strategy, which is to dominate the peninsula. And so he really has no intention of peaceful coexistence, and so his long-term political warfare that he's conducting is really what we need to focus on. And so, maybe their relationship will keep things under control, but I am not optimistic that the relationship alone will solve problems.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll leave our conversation here and now watch video for our next discussion.
평화 번영의 새 역사를 써나가기 위하여 우리와 마음을 같이한 남녀 교례들과 해외 동포들에게 따뜻한 새해 인사를 보냅니다.
남북 관계에 있어서도 더 은신의 폭을 넓혀 노력해 나가겠습니다.
Chairman Kim didn't mention inter-Korean relations in his party plenum speech. This is in sharp contrast to his New Year's speech last year, when he mentioned inter-Korean relations 10 times and sent greetings to the people of South Korea. Now, Mr. Fitzpatrick, not mentioning inter-Korean at all, is Chairman Kim strategically ghosting South Korea?
South Korea, in the ghosting terminology, has been ready to go on a date for the last 3 years. And for the first year of the current administration, North Korea was ignoring South Korea. Then they had some interactions, but only in order to get engagement with the United States. When that failed, they've given up on the South Koreans. If I were South Korean, I would feel quite insulted by this. I mean, it's part of their peninsula too, and to simply ignore them and deal with the United States, I think, is just backwards.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you think by shutting out South Korea, is North Korea trying to pressure Seoul to move away from the U.S.-led sanctions campaign?
Well, certainly, yes. I think that, part of their strategy is always to drive a wedge between the ROK-U.S. alliance. Certainly on sanctions, President Moon has wanted to open Kaesong and Kumgangsan, but he has also stood firm on sanctions. He has said that there should be no sanctions relief until North Korea's nuclear program is denuclearized past the point of no return. And so I think we should keep that in mind. But the other thing is that I think that Kim Jong-un made a strategic mistake when he allowed President Moon to speak to the Korean people in the North. They saw President Moon as a good person, as somebody they could make a deal with. And it really undermined the work of the Propaganda and Agitation Department because he did not live up to the caricature and the narrative that they had put forth. And so I think since September of 2018, we have seen a sustained anti-South Korea campaign because Kim Jong-un miscalculated. And that feeds into his failure to get sanctions relief and to get a deal because the Korean people in the North think that both President Moon and President Trump can make a deal. And so the failure lies with Kim Jong-un, and he's got to blame everyone else, both President Moon, President Trump, and his party officials for his failure.
And also, the Blue House says that it is paying close attention to the sanctions relief resolution laid out by China and Russia. Do you think South Korea is trying to ease sanctions at this point to breathe life into the denuclearization talks? And what will be the reaction from America?
I don't think South Korea is trying to ease sanctions. In fact, I think that South Korea and the United States work together at the UN Security Council really to ensure that China and Russia didn't subvert the Security Council to try to get sanctions relief. And of course, I think also now China and Russia, I think, are quite upset with Kim Jong-un's rhetoric and raising tensions because that actually undermines China and Russia's attempt to get sanctions relief. And so I think that Kim Jong-un continues to paint himself into a corner by his actions.
Mr. Fitzpatrick, reportedly, Seoul's goal this year is to find a space for inter-Korean cooperation to do a joint survey for a DMZ peace zone or do the railway work or more cooperation in the tourism area. How viable are these plans, do you think?
All of these plans run up against UN prohibitions on transfer of funds to North Korea and U.S. policy. Now, if the United States was willing to see some relaxation in this, then these are viable. And there may be some areas of joint mapping of the DMZ or something that would not run up against the UN sanctions. As long as they don't violate UN sanctions, then anything below that is possible. Going above that will require U.S. agreement. And South Korea and the United States have been in lockstep on this. Maybe they can persuade Washington if North Korea gives them something for it. There's got to be some give and take from North Korea.
Colonel Maxwell, so at this point, what can President Moon do to improve inter-Korean relations and to give new life into the denuclearization talks?
Well, I think President Moon has tried every effort to do that. He has made offers. He has, I think what they did at Panmunjom, at Pyongyang, the comprehensive military agreement. President Moon has really tried to improve inter-Korean relations. But it is Kim Jong-un that has not reciprocated. I mean, you talk about DMZ. After the comprehensive military agreement, they withdrew the guard posts, they demilitarized JSA, but North Korea has not participated in remains recovery. South Korea is doing that unilaterally. And there are many other aspects of the comprehensive military agreement that the North has chosen not to implement, to include having regular meetings between the North and the South. So, military coordination meetings. So the North is not reciprocating to President Moon's actions. But I think he has acted in good faith, but it is Kim Jong-un who is the problem.
What can President Moon do?
I think President Moon can do what he has been doing, is have a good relationship with the United States, to talk to President Trump about what might be possible in terms of staged efforts toward denuclearization, keeping denuclearization as the goal, seeing if there are any areas where if North Korea made concrete steps toward denuclearization, that the United States would agree to some concrete steps such as reopening Kaesong or the tourism areas. These all could be possible if there were real negotiations. North Korea, though, has not been willing to engage in any such negotiations to date.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. We'll now move on to our next segment. Now, time for the photo moment. Time to look at an interesting North Korea picture. Today, we have a photo of North Korea's Workers' Party members attending the 5th plenary meeting of the 7th Central Committee. Around 1,000 officials participated in this year's meeting, 5 times more participants than in the past. In this picture, everybody is simultaneously writing down Chairman Kim's remarks. Colonel Maxwell.
So I think 7 hours of writing while Chairman Kim Castro Jong-un gave a speech is pretty amazing, and they must have filled notebooks. What I always wonder about during a 7-hour speech, were these poor party members allowed a bathroom break?
Mr. Fitzpatrick.
You know, I've been a note taker at meetings, and at some points you stop taking notes because it's not interesting, it's repetition. But I don't think they can do that in North Korea. They've got to keep writing. And you know, all these pictures we see of when Kim Jong-un is making his visits to different sites and so forth, and everybody's got a notebook and they're all furiously writing down. I mean, it's all for show. They don't have to do this, but they're all diligent, aren't they?
They are. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Colonel Maxwell, Mr. Fitzpatrick, thank you for joining us. And this was Washington Talk from the Voice of America, and I'm Eun Jang Cho. Join us next week for more analysis on North Korea.